Hey folks, welcome back to Cats and Kilos. So tonight's video, we're going to talk deadlifts. Two major types of deadlifts, two different types, conventional and sumo deadlifts. And so traditional deadlifts are ones in which your legs are on the inside of your arms. So you would bend down and your hands would be on the outside of your knees. And sumo would be ones in which your legs are on the outside of your arms. So you would bend down and your arms would be on the inside of your knees. Which one is better for you? It depends. Sumo definitely places less stress on your low back. So if you are somebody that has maybe some back issues, maybe sumo might be the better movement for you. Why? Because you tend to be more upright with the sumo movement. Sumo deadlifts tend to put a little bit more pressure on the quads, a little more stress on the quads compared to traditional. And then traditional would put more pressure on those spinal erectors. And then both types would tend to work your hamstrings and your glutes, quite a bit, as well as the quads, as we said, and both really spinal erectors, traps, virtually every muscle in your body. So, which should you do? I would say play around with both. Some might say, well, depending on your body structure, the length of your arms and so on, one would favor the other. I would say try both. How do we do it? Number one, let's talk grip. Three major possibilities with grip. You could do an overhand grip, which is fine as far as balancing everything out, but it's a little bit weaker because things can come out of your hands a little bit easier. Your hands can open a little bit easier. There is a hook grip in which things are still pretty even as far as the stress on either side of your body, and you hook your fingers around your thumbs, but it's a lot less stress on your thumbs. I personally don't like this grip myself, although some people may, depending on your hand structure and so on, the thickness of your fingers. I know some people might like this. I prefer the alternate grip, which is much more traditional with deadlifts. And maybe it's because I've been doing them for a while and I grew up a million years ago. I just prefer traditional. I have personally never had an issue with that. And I really don't know anybody that has, but it's a theoretical risk, right? So experiment, see what you think. If you've got known bicep issues, maybe you should take that overhand grip and not do the alternate grip. If you don't and you're younger, maybe you can mix grips. That is a traditional one. Proceed with caution. A lot of people would say that you grip the bar by putting your hand as far around as you can and then straightening it up so you can get the tightest grip possible. But what does this do? It actually brings you lower than you need to be. If you have a loose grip, you could be a little bit higher. And that's why sometimes, when you wear wrist straps, you can deadlift more. In addition to being able to hold it more firmly, you also don't have to pull it quite as high off the floor. That little bit off the bottom can make a difference. So holding it loosely, that makes no sense, right? Well, you know what? It depends on your finger length and finger strength. You get these mountain climber guys, they can hang off their fingers. They probably don't have to really kind of grip the bar, to the full extent. They could probably almost hang a little bit. And the thing is this, when you lift a heavy weight, it's going to try to straighten your fingers anyway. If you grip it loosely, in a sense, to a point, and you're still holding on with your thumbs, sometimes it's okay. You can get to that point anyway. So that might be a good starting position for you. So play around with that grip. Don't necessarily think you have to really tighten your hands around it. You know what I mean? Maybe play around with the looser grip. If it's falling out of your fingers, maybe then try to go with a bit of a tighter grip. Conventional, the typical one that you would expect. So maybe around a shoulder width stance. Some people like a little closer. So call the shoulder width. And your hands are just on the outside of your legs. The further out your hands go, the more you have to bend down. So the closer your hands are, the bit of an advantage. So if your hands are maybe shoulder width and your footing is even closer, maybe you've got a bit of an advantage. Okay, so call it approximately shoulder width and call your hands maybe minimally out. You grip on the outside of your legs, we said, and now the key, we do not want the low back to round forward. Rounding your low back in either of these two movements is horrendous. It puts tremendous pressure on the discs in your low back and your lumbar spine, and it predisposes you to a herniated disc, to a disc herniation. Not good. You don't want a herniated disc. So we don't want to round the back forward. So we want to keep the back flat and maybe even slightly extended, but at least flat, and your butt back in order to achieve this, right? In the case of conventional, as long as your back is flat, we're bending mostly from the hips. And there are variations like Romanian deadlifts in which you just unlock your knees a little bit and you're just bending from the hips for that movement. And that hits your hamstrings pretty well, even glutes, right? These are Romanian deadlifts. So the traditional deadlift is almost a version of the Romanian deadlift, but you're just bending your knees a little bit lower, especially in the starting position, right? Bending your knees a little bit lower, back flat, maybe slightly extended or flat. Looking forward, maybe to start. Your hands are on the outside of the bar, or of your knees, I should say. Boom, legs bent, and then you pretend from this position that you Romanian deadlift it up. So what I mean is you don't straighten your legs at this point because you're going to end up forward, right? All you do is you pretty much Romanian deadlift it, even though you're in a much lower position than typical Romanian deadlifts. So, right? Okay, so right up against your shins when you do it. You're extending from the hips with your back flat, right up against your body. Right? That's the traditional deadlift. You step up to it, maybe approximately shoulder width, a little closer for some, I would say. Your hands on the outside of it, maybe a little further for some, depending on your size. Not a super tight grip, flat back, looking forward, and then Romanian. From this position. Right? Okay. So, sumo, what would we be doing differently? So the big difference we said with sumo is that your legs are on the outside of your arms. And this then brings you closer to the floor. That's a pretty big advantage. It does take away some other advantages, that you might get off the floor, but generally with sumo, if you can just start getting it moving, you may complete the lift. With traditional, you may get it moving from the bottom, but you may get stuck as you go up. So play around, see which is better for you, what you feel stronger with. So sumo, you take a nice wide stance and let's call it 45 degrees. Sometimes it might be a little bit less or sometimes wider depending on how wide your footing is. The closer you are, generally your stance won't be quite as pronounced on the angle. When you get to a certain distance, 45, maybe even further, might be more than 45, maybe closer would be less than 45, right? Call it 45 degrees. Okay, so you got a nice wide stance on this one. And a lot of people would say from here, it's almost like a squat where you're going down, upright with your back, until you grab onto the bar. And look where your legs are. Man, they're really almost, getting close to parallel with the floor almost, right? And then they'll say, just straighten your legs to lift it up. However, this is a really awkward position to get up from. It's like a dead squat at the bottom that you're trying to get from. And what you'll see, even with high-level powerlifters, like world-class powerlifters, they'll recommend this, and then they'll do this. And they'll say, by the way, push with your legs, everything at the same time. Push with your legs as well as pulling with your back at the same time. And then you see this. They do this. Poof, their body goes like this, and then it starts going up. soon as you do this, you're locking everything out, and maybe you got some momentum, and this is the way you can lift, and you're great at this. Good for you. If you're a world-class lifter, excellent. But when you're just starting out, I wouldn't recommend trying to do it that way. What I would recommend as far as your cue is I would say maybe start with like maybe a 45-degree bend to the knee, maybe a little bit lower if you want, or just grab it how you're comfortable, maybe just outside of the knurls, whatever the case. Get your loose grip or whatever, and you can say you're way far forward now. Yeah, okay, so now you go down, and now maybe you're 45 degrees, on the knees, and you're gonna say that's not low enough for a sumo deadlift. Well, it is if you do this cue, right? You can go lower if you want, but your cue is this. You do not press with your legs as normally you would see some people recommend when they teach you how to do sumo deadlifts. I would say it's the same thing. It's 100% now. Pretending you're doing a Romanian deadlift. You are just pulling to try to straighten up your upper body. Why? Because your legs will straighten naturally. You don't have to think about pushing with your legs. If you did, once you got to this point, if you thought about pushing with your legs, you're going to push yourself forward. That's not your cue. Your cue from this position is purely a pull back, a pull up. A hip extension is your cue. Hey, professor. Good boy. A hip extension is your cue. Professor, it's professor, right? A hip extension. You're straightening from the hips. The knees will follow. You don't have to think about pushing and pulling unless you've got such flexibility that you can get underneath it. And you've got such crazy leg strength compared to the rest of your body that you can truly just push with your legs without moving your body. But most people, almost nobody has that. So what you do is you get yourself underneath it to a point, right? Underneath it, looking forward, back flat. You don't push with your legs. What you do is a Romanian deadlift. This is not a Romanian deadlift. You're almost upright. Yeah, but think Romanian deadlift. Your cue is you're straightening your torso. And if you think that, straightening from the hips, get your body underneath you, you're kind of upright. Woof! All right, so that is, for some people, maybe myself included, easier. It's once it starts moving, even if you take a second, you can get it to the top. And again, play around with both, see what you think is better for you. All right, so final point is footwear. You notice I was doing this in my socks. You don't have to wear socks, but at the very least, you don't want to wear anything with a high heel. You actually don't want to wear anything with any kind of height to the sole because you're going to have to pull it further from the floor. Especially with a heel. If it's got a higher heel, it's going to be pushing you forward, which is horrendous for deadlifts. So you want a really flash-soled shoe with a minimum sole. And to be honest, I've gotten used to deadlifting in my socks lately. And there's some similar things that you could do, for powerlifting if that's what you wanted to do. It's much better for your back. So, it doesn't push you forward. Now, why is Max like doing this kind of stuff? Because he's trying to go after another one of these little cats that we have. He's a predator, this guy. So we've got to keep him under control. So he's got testosterone. He's been doing deadlifts. You know what I mean? He's like professor when he does this stuff. He's a nut, right? Anyway, don't be a nut. Just do these deadlifts. You'll like them. They're a great movement. It's going to give you a great overall body strength. And if you're one of our younger viewers just getting into this, play around, see what you think. And, any concerns, throw them in the comment section. I'll be happy to respond. And that's pretty much it for tonight. You have a great rest of the day. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. We will see you next time.